for the future, and you can listen to it again. So you probably have to click now on a window to give your consent that it is being recorded. So Maria, first, the floor is yours for your presentation.
Thank you, Bernd. Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I'm very happy to be here to welcome.
Now we lost you.
So many interesting and hopeful here, actually, with Johannes Lumpers. No. You cannot hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Maria, we can hear you. Maria? Maybe we wait a minute.
Let's see. You can hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
Yeah. Maybe we were not unmuted. Anyway, okay, I'm really sorry. I hope the connection will not interrupt any longer. We are actually in a new building, DG Climate Action, close to Schumann. So hopefully we can even see some of you when you visit Brussels. So I'm here with two colleagues to do this actually climate action policy overview. There's Valeria Florin, who will talk about the latest developments in the land use sector legislation and policy, and Johannes Klumpers, who will actually present the adaptation part, and I will cover general climate action policy and part of the mitigation part. So we're kind of sharing the presentation in order to provide you the best possible overview. Having said that, it is actually very challenging in the time we have, half an hour, to present all the developments. So I very much, we're going just to give you pointers really. And but I believe that if you are having a project working in a particular area, maybe you know even better than me or than us the legislation, and you're following all the developments, so you can actually, well, wherever possible, adapt your projects to the changing policy and legislative landscape on one hand, and as Bernd mentioned, very importantly, to provide us useful feedback actually from the ground, because this is also very important for us. So next slide, please. I start with a reminder, I think, about the European Green Deal, because this is actually what has been guiding the current Commission. In December 2019, you know that the Commission proposed to strengthen the target for 2030, to increase it to at least 55% compared to 1990. And just to remind you, the previous target was 40% in 2030. So actually it's, maybe you think 15% is not very big change, but it is really a very important change, because a number of actually emission reductions have already taken place. Actually, the easiest parts of emission reductions have taken place. So any future emission reductions are more difficult, more expensive, and that's why actually we need projects like your projects to show how this is actually possible. So in 2021, in July, we were very happy to have the climate law adopted, because this actually binds us now for climate neutrality in 2050. Before it was an aspirational objective if you want it. Now it is actually in our legislation. We also, in the same month, well, July 2021, the European Commission adopted a set of legislative proposals to make actually this ambitious 2030 target, the at least 55% target, possible. So that's a package that is known under the abbreviation Fit for 55. So if you could move to next slide. This is actually just a snapshot of some of the relevant legislative proposals that have been put in place to make this 2030 target possible. In fact, there are other proposals out there as well. But what is probably most important for your projects is on this slide. I just will briefly mention the emission trading scheme with its enhanced ambition, the land use, forestry and agriculture regulation, which Valeria will no doubt mention later on. We have the effort sharing regulation that is being actually also revised in order to increase the 2030 target to at least 40%, which has then an impact on the national energy and climate plans of the member states, but I will mention this later on. There is a proposal for revised renewable energy directive, energy efficiency directive, and I will not mention all the rest of those proposals that are on this slide in interest of time. But if we can move to the next slide, just want to focus on the LIFE21 slide, which is largely insufficient on the revision of the EU emission trading system. As this is the emission trading system is the cornerstone of our policy to reduce emissions in energy and industry sectors, but also this revision is cornerstone of the Fit for 55 package, because the ETS sectors actually have to reduce emissions by 61% by 2030, super ambitious. And this actually necessitates of changing a number of articles in this in the directive in order to increase to increase the cap. There are changes to free allocation, to market stability reserve, to revenue use. There is also another proposal on carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is also very important, because it is really important that imported products also either have to pay carbon prices, or they have to pay a tax on entry into the union. And this will ensure actually a fairer competition on one hand, and on the other hand will incite actually companies across the globe to reduce emissions in these very important sectors of energy and industry. So we also actually, because the ambition is high, which will result in higher prices of a number of products, this is why there is a new social climate fund that is proposed. With this revision, this legislative proposal, together with all the other proposals, are actually in their last phases of trialogues, of negotiations between the co-legislators, and we very much hope for a swift conclusion of this process, because the economic actors, but also the local authorities, need to have certainty of the way forward. So next slide. Which is actually a new development of this year, the Repower EU communication and plan, which was necessary to address the consequences of the war in Ukraine. I'm sure most of you have already heard, but the Repower EU plan focuses on three main elements, which are actually all of them, in fact, aiming to speed up the green transition, if anything. So the Repower EU plan doesn't change the European Green Deal. If anything, it accelerates it with the focus on actually renewable energy, energy efficiency, and smart investments. So they are a number of changes, and can we move just to the next slide? There are a number of changes that made actually to the legislative proposals. I'm not going to that are actually in negotiation, which I mentioned already, linked to the Fit for 55. I'm not going to go into the details of those, but some of them will have an impact on some of the projects. Like, for example, we have now a project on innovative solar photovoltaics. Nothing really changes for the project in a way, but in fact, we have a EU solar energy strategy with a very, very ambitious objective. So because we will rely so much on solar energy and on wind energy, that's why there is like increase in the ambition, but also in the support towards these sectors. For example, there is an initiative to speed up permitting for renewable energy. On the other hand, hydrogen is also becoming very, very important, even more important than before, because we need to reduce or eliminate actually the dependency that we have on natural gas, not only because of its emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, but because of energy security. And for example, we have one project today here, which is actually going to demonstrate a technology based on bio, which is based on bio residues and will produce biohydrogen. So very interesting to see the outcomes of this project. I'm just mentioning here, and there are some projects. I actually missed to mention a project on the EU ETS, actually linked to the EU ETS and to the carbon markets, COAS project. And there are a number of projects that I will not mention or the colleagues will not mention. But if you are here, actually, this means that your projects are policy relevant and very important. So next slide. Switching to F-gases, we have actually with LIFE program supported a number of projects in F-gases, in supporting actually reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from the use of F-gases. We have a very good regulation actually on F-gases, the 2014 regulation, which has been extremely successful, and it has been resulting in a good reduction of emissions across the EU. However, in order to get to climate neutrality, this is not enough. So if you move to next slide, there's a new actually regulation which we have proposed for revision of the F-gases, the current F-gases regulation this year in April, which is going to result in phasing down HFCs even more quickly. And the new F-gases regulation is really going to support alternatives to F-gases that don't have high global warming potential, and there will be actually in the proposal there is a prohibition of the use of F-gases in a number of important sub-sectors such as air conditioning and heat pump applications, switchgear and refrigeration. And here today, I believe there are two projects actually which will contribute directly to reduction of emissions in air conditioning sector and for switchgear. So very good to hear from you what you think and what your ambition is later on in the day. So next slide. I have one more slide here before I pass the floor to Valeria, which is to do with the changes in the national energy and climate plans that are related both to Fit for 55 and Repower EU plan. So in 2023, this year, in fact, member states need to submit an update to a draft update to their national energy and climate plans. And the Commission is actually working to provide guidance on how to do that, how to better do that. This is necessary in order to address the high ambition of 55% reductions on one hand, and on the other hand, to link it to increasing the energy security in the context of the Repower EU extremely important. So we have, I believe, one project actually, Life Together for 1.5, which is very important because it will create awareness and support for ambitious climate action through engagement of the public and stakeholders, which is actually very necessary to make these national energy and climate plans actually a reality. So not only plans, but that they deliver on the ground. So the next slide is actually on the sustainable carbon cycles. And if I may pass the floor to Valeria, I hope she is connected.
Yes, thank you, Maria. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yes, thank you, and good morning, everyone. My name is Valeria, and I work in DG Clima in the unit that is responsible for everything related to land, forestry, agriculture, and climate change mitigation. So Maria already introduced the new package of climate laws that we have to achieve our higher ambition for 2030. And in that context, well, I didn't put a slide on this because I knew I didn't have much time, but you surely all know that we have a regulation on how much carbon should be absorbed by every member states in their land and forests. That is the land use change and forestry regulation. And last year we proposed to make the target of this regulation much more ambitious than it previously was. And so the idea is, the proposal is that by 2030, European forests and land should absorb 310 million tons of CO2 from the atmosphere. And what we have now are targets at the level of the member states. But then we also realize that there is a gap, that is that we don't have direct and strong incentives for land managers to take action on the ground. And therefore, and also another very important thing is that if we want to be climate neutral by 2050, which is also an objective of the climate law, we will need, of course, to drastically reduce our emissions, but there will also be some emissions that are very hard to abate and that will need to be compensated with carbon removals if we want to be climate neutral. So last year we published a communication, and the title is in Sustainable Carbon Cycles, which is about how a policy roadmap. It's a vision of the Commission on how we should, in the next years, promote action on the ground for land managers to absorb carbon from the CO2. From the atmosphere. And actually, the communication is also about industrial, technological ways to remove carbon from the atmosphere. But now I focus on the nature-based solutions to do that, which we refer to as carbon farming. Next slide, please. So with carbon farming, we mean a business model whereby land managers are rewarded for carbon sequestration, which means removing carbon from the atmosphere, but also reducing the release of carbon from soils, from biomass to the atmosphere. And when talking about carbon farming, we fixed the two objectives for us, two aspirational goals for the future. The first is that by 2028, all farmers should have access to good data about their emissions and removals on their land. And the second objective is that our European target of 310 million tons of removals by 2030 should be achieved also thanks to carbon farming approaches. And here we need your help because these life projects that test solutions on the ground are particularly important. We have talked to many farmers and forest owners in the last years, and it's clear that the main barriers to take up carbon farming approaches is that there is a lack of advisory services, so farmers don't know exactly what they should do on their land because outcomes can be very different from region to region. And there is also a lot of confusion because there are many different types of MRV systems, how to monitor and report carbon removals, and there is a lot of uncertainty there. So farmers are not sure that if they do something, they will actually get some results. So testing solutions on the ground is very important, and there are many LIFE projects that are doing this in different regions of Europe. I see that this year we're very happy because many of the projects that were granted have an approach not only to make action happen on the ground, ground, but also to monitor it and to take this to the market in some way, in the sense that there many projects are already including a way to reward land managers for their action. So there will be projects on peat restoration, on afforestation, on better forest management, and also projects across the value chain, like cereal, which takes a carbon farming approach not only at the stage of agricultural production, but also all along the value chain of in the cereal sector. So we are very, very happy to and eager to see more from these projects and how you can help us achieve these goals. And yeah, so there was also an action plan, and one of these among these there is of course continuing to support projects through Horizon Europe and through the LIFE program. And I think I have maybe one next slide, which is just to update you on what we are doing right now. So the first legislative action coming out of this communication is to propose a regulation on how to certify carbon removals, which would be it's planned to be adopted at the end of November. And in this framework, we would like to we have been working on identifying what are the main problems that we need to address to improve the uptake of carbon removal activities. And we believe that a framework for a robust framework for certification can be a first step towards a better inclusion of carbon removals in the European climate policies. And in the two main principle of this regulation, which is now still being finalized, but what we would like to do is to set some high quality criteria to recognize carbon removals. And these criteria are that carbon removals should be accurately quantified, they should be additional, they should ensure that carbon is stored for the long term. And they should also, when possible, provide co-benefits for the environment and for sustainability. And then we also want to increase trust in carbon removal activities, because trust is a big problem. Since right now, carbon credits sold on voluntary carbon markets often are not produced in a reliable way, and so people don't trust them, which affects also those who provide high quality carbon removals. So the regulation will also propose some rules on how certification schemes operate, so that we can trust that the carbon removals are certified in a reliable way. And okay, so more on this in the next months, and I'm sure we will be in touch. And as soon as the proposal is out, I'm very happy to explain what the detailed contents are. And then I leave the floor to Johannes, I think, to talk about adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. Just 2 slides on sustainable finance
Maria,
strategy.
then, yes.
No problem. Before I pass the floor to Johannes, just to mention that in addition to, well, all that you heard related directly to our climate policy, the EU is actually also working to support actually the financial markets to fund and invest in projects that are sustainable in many different ways. And actually, we have sustainable finance strategy, which has 85 action points there. So they are around these 4 main pillars you see on that slide: transition finance, inclusiveness, resilience, and contribution of the financial system to sustainability, and international cooperation. And if you move just to the next slide, we're very happy actually to have one project that is selected and here that is contributing directly to the objectives of this strategy. It's called STRESS, and it is on monitoring climate vulnerability in the financial sector, because that is also very important. And we don't often have projects in this area, so very happy to have it. And now I pass the floor to Johannes, who is going to talk about adaptation policy, because it is also very necessary that we adapt to the climate change.
Thank you very much, Maria. I will try to share my screen. So let's see whether that works. Can I check whether you see this or not?
There are the 4 boxes.
You see it now?
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much. So, dear participants, I would like to talk to you mostly about the EU adaptation strategy, including one of its elements, which is the mission on adaptation to climate change. But before that, I would like to say a couple of words about the climate law in relation to adaptation, because the climate law is not only introducing the 55% reduction goal, as was explained by Maria, but it has a very important impact on adaptation as well. The climate law was adopted after the EU adaptation strategy, but what is so important about it is that it introduces for the very first time actually a duty to adapt that didn't exist before. The member states, the European Union as a whole, has now a duty to adapt to climate change, and also to a duty to have an assessment of the progress and the measures on adaptation. And that duty to report on progress is a duty on the member states, but it is also a duty on us in the European Commission, that we need to actually evaluate the consistency of union measures with ensuring progress and adaptation, whereas the member states will work on the consistency of their relevant national measures with ensuring progress and adaptation. In the future, it might also lead to recommendations to member states on their adaptation measures. So this is something which is new, but so very recent. But this is, of course, occupying us in the adaptation unit in DG Klima quite a lot, because we also need to develop actually guidelines and a whole process on that duty to adapt, and what is measured and in what way to be reported about, and all these aspects. And the LIFE program is actually having probably an impact on some of these, because I know that at least 2 member states I'm aware of, the Netherlands and I think Estonia, they have both a LIFE project that has already, in the Dutch case at least, has already started a couple of months back, which is supporting the Dutch national adaptation strategy and efforts. And I think Estonia had the same, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure about Estonia, but I thought it was Estonia, where the same idea is present. Now, the EU adaptation strategy, so this is preceding the climate law by a couple of months. So the adaptation strategy was adopted in February 2021, so a couple of months ahead of the climate law. And it has a couple of objectives, actually 4 big level objectives: smarter adaptation, more systemic adaptation, faster adaptation, and stepping also up the international action for climate resilience. And the smarter adaptation, this is something which we are using all kinds of inputs, hoping for inputs from, of course, Horizon Europe, Copernicus, the European Climate and Health Observatory, for example, Climate Adapt, the European Environment Agency, but also the LIFE program, because many of the LIFE projects also do, of course, develop knowledge on how to adapt better and smarter. So the LIFE program is a bridge between, in my understanding at least, is a bridge between the knowledge development and the use of knowledge on the ground. More systemic adaptation, this is very, very, very often mentioned in many, at every conference you go. This is enormously important because we want to avoid maladaptation. Maladaptation meaning you would take adaptation measures that would be detrimental to other objectives, actually. And the worst what one could imagine is that one would take adaptation measures that actually would reduce mitigation. And that should, of course, never happen. So you need to systematically think about it, and we are therefore also on the adaptation part favoring very much nature-based solutions, because nature-based solutions usually bring along a lot of co-benefits. So even if you were to put in place a nature-based solution for the purpose of adaptation, it usually has positive effects also in terms of mitigation and in terms of biodiversity, for example. And this is what we are looking for. And we are also looking for that you think this actually decades ahead. That is very important because investments in infrastructures, whether it is for energy, telecommunications, roads, railways, hospitals, it is investments that will stick with us for decades. And so you need to sell yourself to project in a 2050 from now, what is the climate we have in my region, in my city, in my country in 2050, and what does that mean for the investments in infrastructures that we have today to do today. Nature-based solutions, yeah, I mentioned it. So we this is as soon as this is possible to use nature-based solutions, either alone for certain adaptation questions or in combination with other measures, we give priority to this. So this is very important to know. And Valeria and Maria have already mentioned other aspects for why nature-based solutions for mitigation purposes is so important. Faster adaptation. Now here we are coming into also the mission on adaptation to climate change comes in the picture here. We believe that actually in many parts in Europe, the thinking about adapting to climate change has not really been taken really seriously, or not quickly enough. In some parts of Europe, the awareness is totally there, and every forest fire or every flooding is actually increasing that awareness. But in other areas, in other parts of Europe, maybe that awareness is not there yet so much. But there will be no single part of the European Union that will that will not need to think of adaptation. And that is why we really believe that there needs to be an acceleration, and the mission on adaptation to climate change is actually has been introduced for that purpose. So the mission in the EU adaptation strategy is one of the measures that are foreseen there. And the mission on adaptation to climate change is just one out of 4 Green Deal missions. One other, the smart cities one, is dealing with mitigation, then one is dealing with ocean and waters, and one with healthy soils. And that one was actually on one of Valeria's slides as well. So what the missions are trying to do is that they bridge between the world of research and innovation and those that need to implement, those that need to use the knowledge to actually better fulfill the societal objectives. And in our case, it is the objective of adapting to climate change. And if you want to remember keywords, so that if you want to put it into a very few number of words, what the mission on adaptation to climate change is about. So on the one side, it's a bridge. As I mentioned, on the other side, it is the word regions that you should remember, because with that mission, we are aiming specifically at local actors, local authorities, cities, communities, regions, because it is in these local territories, in these local authorities, where actually many decisions need to be taken on adaptation. And we want to help in 3 ways. With risk assessments on the one side, to actually help them better understand risk assessments and prepare for their risks. And when I say here risk assessment, I'm not only talking about the risks that climate change brings with it, but I'm also talking about what is the current actually level of preparedness in a given region towards these climate risks. It is a huge difference if you are living in a city, for example, which is 80% or 90% of its surface is sealed, compared to a city where maybe only 50% of its surface is sealed. The first city will have much more difficulties with pluvial floodings, so over too much rain, and as the second one. So taking into account what the current level of preparedness or the current situation is in that region that is hit by certain climate phenomena is also part of understanding the risks and preparing for them. The second way of helping regions is to help them designing visions and roadmaps actually to that resilience, all listing and preparing and planning for all the actions that are necessary to transform the area under responsibility. And in those regions, we also believe that a couple of them will be wanting to upscale solutions, will be demonstrating solutions and on the ground. And here we come to a situation, here these ones, especially the 2 last ones, especially so the planning and then the demonstrating, here we are having a clear link to the LIFE program. So this is not only Horizon Europe, this is also the LIFE program, or very much so even the LIFE program, where there is, I think, between the demonstration actions in Horizon Europe and the LIFE program, there is a total continuum. And the LIFE program has traditionally already having had a much more maybe regional focus than Horizon Europe. So this scheme here is not only about Horizon Europe. This also represents, from our perspective, what we would like to achieve with the LIFE actions under the LIFE program. Yeah, I think I said enough of that. We have one other means of actually trying to get regions interested into the activities of the mission, interested into adaptation, and we have asked them to sign, if they want, to sign a mission charter. So, which means basically they agree to the objectives of the mission. They agree to adapting to take measures on adaptation. We had a first announcement of charter signatories in June. We just had a couple of days ago a second announcement, and we have now 215 regions that are willing to sign that charter from 24 member states now. We have 40 friends of the mission. Friends of the mission, this is a category. So these are all these kind of organizations, can be companies, can be research organizations, can be citizens networks, local action groups, all those kinds of organizations that are not local authorities, that are not territories, but that are actually helping those regions in adapting. And we are complementing the risk assessment aspects from the mission with another big initiative that also comes through the adaptation strategy, and that is the EU-wide climate risk assessment. So we will, for the very first time in spring 2024, there will be a publication produced by the European Environment Agency, and will give an overall picture on the climate risks in the European Union. And that will be on another aggregate level than the local risk assessments, but that will bring in all knowledge we have specifically on Europe when it comes to climate risks. It will bring that knowledge together, and it will be also repeated in the future. Climate resilience dialogue, we are working with insurers to actually look at the climate protection gap, and there's many activities on water, both in terms of too much water, but also in terms of too little water. There has been very recently the European Drought Observatory put in place. And many of our measures, and that is, I think, the last thing I want to say, is we will use the Climate Adapt platform of the European Environment Agency to actually showcase and to inform everyone. So both in terms of what the mission does, but also the Drought Observatory, the Health Observatory, all these aspects are available through Climate Adapt, and Climate Adapt is a platform that is also fed by every member state, because there is a network of correspondence that brings in the information into Climate Adapt from all the countries and from all various aspects of environmental protection, but also climate mitigation and climate adaptation. It's Climate Adapt, so it's about adaptation, but there are many projects on there where you will see which have that systemic approach and which also simultaneously then address mitigation and biodiversity aspects, for example. Okay, Bernd, Maria, or Christian, I do not know who chairs now, right now. I think it's Bernd. I'm giving you back the floor. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Johannes. Thanks, Valeria, and thanks, Maria. Very great and good presentation, which gives us an insight in the policy dimension, but also the connection to the individual projects. Very good.